I'll introduce myself first, I guess. I'm LaTourelle. I have a consulting company called Earth Venture Capital. We focus on generating revenue streams in business as well as providing access and awareness and resources for greater social benefit. I think that's something we're all interested in here. Douglas Lawrence, on my left, is a portfolio manager at JP Morgan, which has made incredible strides in the green real estate arena. I just met George. He is amazing, and I don't think I could distill all of his incredible qualities in a simple intro. So I'll let him introduce himself.
So my name is George Gosieski. I'm a partner in a company called Business Ecosystems, and we focus in 4 areas. One is building knowledge, creating self-funding sustainability strategies for corporations in the public sector. We do a lot of work around analytics on sustainability, and then finally we have a group that actually executes on those strategies to guarantee that the outcomes are met. So that's what we do. I have a strong corporate background, 27 years in the corporate sector, 19 years with the Boeing airplane, and 8 years with Capital One. So, Doug, we have a little bit of a connection there.
Yeah, I'm a guerrilla banker.
Also, I play a lot with environmental NGOs. For example, I'm on the WRI's Greenhouse Gas Technical Working Group defining the protocols for both product and supply chain. And Doug and I are both also on the Green Underwriting Standards Committee. So again, yet another connection. So anyway, that's a little bit about me, and I'm going to be focusing on the built environment sector as we move forward. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about the built environment sector and what my thoughts are. First off, the sector started out focusing on green buildings, and I suggested that we expand it to built environment because from my perspective, the built environment is much more comprehensive and thinks more in terms of an ecosystem approach rather than on one specific element such as buildings. I think it's important to be looking at the built environment as a contributor to the ecosystem in the sense that the built environment has cultural impacts as well as tangible or physical impacts, and that the built environment tends to be an enabler or inhibitor to other aspects of the ecosystem. So one area that I'd like to focus on when the built environment group gets together is looking at a definition of what is a built environment. It's pretty broad and needs to have some boundaries established so that we don't boil the ocean and that we can actually produce some tangible results. But we also need to be thinking of it in terms of a commercial sector, a residential sector, and a public sector, because each of those has different characteristics. We would probably need to be thinking in terms of what is the present state of the built environment and the players in those arenas and what they're doing, and looking towards a future state. So we'll need to spend some time defining what is a future state or outcome we want. And then finally, we need to be thinking about the intersects with some of the other sectors that are going to be presented to you today. Because at the end of the day, like in any ecosystem, there are overlaps and contributing factors, or what I like to think of as collateral impact, that we need to address. And ultimately define some type of roadmap that we can push forward. And to some of the earlier statements, maybe developing roadmaps that businesses, for example, might be able to follow so that they understand what the trends are and where they can then implement based on their maturity, their placement on the maturity curve of sustainability to begin to implement elements of a roadmap towards becoming more sustainable. So as an example from the corporate sector of how impactful thinking of an ecosystem, a built environment as an ecosystem really is, one of our clients had a real estate portfolio of approximately 30 office buildings. When we walked in looking at their footprint, we didn't look at making their buildings more energy efficient. We looked at reducing their portfolio. So we reduced their portfolio from 30 buildings to 12 buildings. So we immediately reduced their environmental footprint in that aspect. But we went beyond just thinking of it as sustainability. We then drove down their environmental footprint of the remaining buildings by another 14%. We reduced their operating costs. We improved their organizational efficiency. We improved work-life balance for the employees. We started to drive stronger awareness amongst the employee base as consumers. We improved recruiting and retention for that organization and created more vibrant communities as a result of more mobility within the workforce. So at the end of the day, we like to think of this as return on effort. We don't want to go in and think in terms of just improving the energy efficiency of a building which may be underutilized. We want to understand what the underlying factors are and how do we drive social change as well as environmental change within the opportunities that are available to us. So at the end of the day, just to reiterate Doug's thoughts about being highly collaborative, I'd like to run the group in a very collaborative way, leveraging all the tools that are available to us, not just physical, but also virtual, and to think of this as an affirmative engagement. There is no bad idea. There's no wrong idea. It's a matter of how do we integrate the ideas to come out with some outcome that we've previously defined. Thank you.
So when Doug, when Doug asked us to appear, he simply said, I want you to presence the space. And I love this kind of language that's coming out because I grew up in Seattle and I am a Gen Xer. I'm here to say that we are also doing something in the world. We're not just lazy. Yeah, thank you. The other Gen Xer that's here. What I do at Earth Venture Capital is I sit down with businesses, small businesses, larger and larger businesses who are finally listening to some of this new language. And although it passes by in first wash, presence the sector, we're change agents and that kind of thing, the second and third time it really begins to sink in because this stuff is real. I've been preaching about value in business for the last 10 years when I started as an entrepreneur, a company called Violet Shade that made UV ray block parasols for women. That company donated proceeds to the environment, and I sat across from venture capitalists many times while they shook their hands and said, "Your silly little parasols, what are they going to do?" So I put my boots on and went to law school and started to really dig in deep to this space and study international law and policy, negotiation, getting a broad perspective on these issues, and preaching again and again that we've got to get back to what businesses do best. You know, we've seen how the crash has occurred. Car companies were in finance, banks are in real estate, everything is mixed up. When I sit down with a company, I literally have to ask them, what is it that you do and how do you communicate that? Because that's the essence. Does it mean something to you? Does it excite you? Does it give you joy? If you're not connected to your business, it's not sustainable. You're going to burn out in 2 years, 3 years. I also take them through a process which is, since I'm a Gen Xer, I have this bad 80s metaphor, which is built on businesses are often built like those tiered champagne waterfalls that you see at weddings. But I go directly to the top champagne glass. What is it in your business that is going to benefit all the other sectors? And then we start talking about what is the thing that you can do in your business that's going to benefit your culture, your environment, your local employees, honing in on those specific, active, real, as George said, roadmaps, and activating on those is what is going to accelerate this process that we're all in. We're all sometimes in it with growing pains, and sometimes we hear things and we're just like, that just sounds too out there. But I have to say, just take what you like and leave the rest. You know, we're all here to have cross-communication within the sectors. The other thing that I wanted to just mention, is that, you know, in being a proud sort of generalist, because I gather together teams of whatever business I'm working with needs, you know, whether it's legal or social or creating change agents within a company. I just wanted to touch on leadership as well, in that within each of our environments where we go to work on a daily basis, we can be that conscience, and we can stop dividing ourselves from our environment. This isn't a weekend operation. We have to invigorate ourselves with consciousness and conscience in order to change the way things are done. It's uncomfortable, but necessary. So I'll end with that and turn it over to Doug. Yeah. Oh, well, I have to say one thing. I'm sorry about the roundtable discussion. I apologize. So I'm anchoring the Social Innovation and Capital Markets Roundtable, I think. And we'll be discussing how to create greater revenue streams for your company, and also at the same time achieving solid social benefit. So, you know, if you have a question about how to do that in your company, or you've got a great story about how that happened, we'd love to hear it. Thanks.
My name is Doug Lawrence. This is my day off, so I'm here today as a private citizen. Monday through Friday, however, I'm a portfolio manager for a green real estate fund, which is the first one of its kind in the country run by a bank. We have raised $180 million in this very difficult environment to raise money in, because we focused on the things that business people can understand. They don't necessarily understand what it means to be sustainable until you say, sustainable means sustaining and protecting your investment. They understand sustainable means sustaining and protecting the return on your investment. They can begin to move in that direction. So there's a translation process that happens for business from what we do as green, on the green agenda, to what we need to do to get business to incorporate that agenda in the way they look at things. One of the things we talked about to our leadership was, look, there's a national security issue here as well if you're going to be an investor. If you think about it, we have 47 years left of fossil fuels. We have 97 years left of natural gas, and we have about 155 years left of coal. And we're in a world where we have 6 billion people on the planet today. We can neither house nor clothe, fuel, or feed 6 billion people. We're going to have 9 billion by 2050. What are we going to do then? We know that the cost of those commodities to fuel and to feed people of this world with 9 billion people is going to be higher. And we know that 7 out of 10 of the largest nations on earth by population will be Islamic countries. Not making a discussion about religion. What I am saying is I'm talking about political instability. So what the administration has done, and what business leaders are beginning to understand, is that green protects your bottom line. And that's how we have to move the agenda forward to do the right thing for the environment and for our kids going forward. So one of the things that we talked about with them was that real estate consumes, or creates rather, about 38% of all greenhouse gas. The other thing that creates more greenhouse gas is automobiles. You know, and where's most real estate? It's in cities and our first suburbs, are very dense urban populations. So where will you get the best efficiencies to reduce greenhouse gas, your carbon footprint? Cities and their first suburbs. And real estate consumes about 72% of all electricity in this country. Where do you reduce that? Cities and our first suburbs. About 14% of all drinkable water is consumed in real estate. And this country happens to be blessed with the best per capita freshwater ratio in the world. The worst is China. You can imagine the next wars. We've already seen water wars in the US, and Arizona, and South Florida, and Georgia to South Carolina. We're already seeing problems where we don't have enough water. Water is wasted in real estate. Water is going to be highly regulated and highly more expensive. And our next fights are not over fuel. It'll be over water internationally. So when you begin to talk to business people at the highest levels of the corporate community about things like that, they begin to start to listen. And they begin to let you have a little room to activate your dream, if you will, to invest reasonably well on the green side. What are the things that we have to talk about to get real estate in particular, which is such a big contributor to environmental change, to move forward? Well, we got to talk about guarantees of performance by the people that install the equipment and systems in our buildings. We need to know there's reliability when you install a system to cool a building like this, to warm a building, to power a building. There's got to be reliability there, and there's got to be guarantees there to get it into your system. Liquidity. Can you sell a green building? Can you make a better profit if you build a green building over a standard construction building? Well, the answer to that happens to be yes now. We have enough data that shows us that even in a downturn like this, green real estate buildings are better occupied, getting higher rents with lower operating expenses, making them more valuable. And banks like that, insurance companies like that, lenders like that. Valuation. We have no idea of how to value green buildings versus standard buildings. That's coming. That's something we're working on together. And it's going to be huge. Appraisers today can neither evaluate a single-family home or a condominium building or a co-op building to say that building is green, it's worth more, it's safer to be in, you should be able to get a bigger mortgage on that building because it's a green building. They can't do it yet. And what we need is a global standard of valuation, just as we have for sustainable measurements in real estate, a global standard for valuation of real estate that will begin to help people move from standard construction to green construction. And then, of course, there's policy, federal policy, state and local policy. Now, states and cities have been way ahead of the federal government for years in terms of being green. You go to Boston, LA, Chicago, DC, Miami, Dallas is even becoming a green city. They've got building codes in place that say you will be a green building of the new construction of LEED Silver or better, and that's important. States have come on board with portfolio renewable standards, meaning they're telling their power companies you must create green energy. 10, 20% of the energy you create has to move from fossil fuels to renewable fuels over a period of time. The federal government has been behind until recently. On April 17th, you may want to write this date down, April 17th, the world changed of this year. And that's because Lisa Jackson, who's the head of the EPA, declared carbon dioxide a danger to the health and welfare of the people of the United States. April 17th of this year. That is a huge date, because it means the federal government can now regulate greenhouse gas emissions from real estate or other industries. And what's really important about that is 2 years ago, the Supreme Court actually said the EPA had the power to do that. So it's already gone through the court systems. And the EPA is now moving very quickly to regulate greenhouse gas. A case in point, in our industry in real estate development, Walmart was just shut down in California for having an environmental impact statement that did not have enough emphasis on its greenhouse gas emissions in a new development program, and it got stopped. Walmart got stopped. That's incredible. All things happen west and move to the east. We expect to see it in our legal battles going forward at some point here on the East Coast. So regulatory policies on our side, liquidity. We think banks and insurance companies are beginning to see that green buildings make more sense than standard construction buildings. Valuation techniques, they're on the way. That'll make a difference for us. And guarantees of performance, that will make a huge difference in terms of reducing anxiety and stress and creating a green building so that we can accelerate this part of the industry going forward.
Wondering, at that lower stage of enterprise, what type of language that you had to use to really convince your clients of the business case for the green movement?
My experience in that area has been I worked on Wall Street at UBS for some time and have a pretty thorough understanding of what it takes to convince people who are solely focused on revenue and profit. I encouraged my clients at that time to engage in socially responsible investing. When you are truly connected with what you want to do and truly believe in your company, venture capitalists look at that first. the second question is always, what's the revenue stream? So when I work with people, it's really on those two fronts. Often your values tell you what social benefit you want to have coming out of your company if you're a social innovator. And then the revenue stream can sometimes be innovative and interesting and technical, and then you bring those two things together. Every business is positioned differently because they all have different personalities. They're all providing a different benefit. And I think if you're going for venture capital, or if you're trying to communicate that to people who maybe seem resistant, I would suggest putting together a quick presentation. I would suggest engaging your peers and engaging a mentor or someone who's in a space that you want to get into to gain feedback regarding that presentation. Never underestimate the elevator pitch. Really hone in on what it is that you're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Very, very moved by you mentioning consciousness and conscience in business discussion. What my concern is, where does that fit into the corporate structures that we have today?
I think that it fits in a transformative forum. From what I've seen, you know, I have a firm belief, based on my experience, that there are many people who are simply segregating themselves from what they do. Industry has gotten to the point where we're no longer connected to the thing that we do. We go to the office and do our task list, and we might go to a training seminar about that job to improve our focus or to become inspired, and it lasts about a week, and then we go back to our other thing. I truly believe representatives here from organizations like Starting Block, people are lonely, people are frustrated, people are ready for change, and it's simply connecting them to organizations like Starting Block. You can do a whole host of an institute which will teach you how to become on purpose, you know, really motivate on purpose. And this is something that happens from the inside out, on a personal level and a corporate level. If you work in a corporation, do what I did. I went to a diversity event at UBS, and I went right up to the CFO and I said, "Hi, my name's Allie, and I'm interested in socially responsible investing and bringing that here." He said, "Great, that sounds great. Yeah, send me an email." And I just developed a correspondence. It all really begins with that personal contact, I think. And if we don't do that and we don't take the action and take the step, we can see what's happening. But I'm a firm believer that in the face of these powerful institutions, connect with the people. Sometimes you'll find allies where you least expect them. And I think Doug can speak to that as well.
Yeah, there is, my dad come from a West Indian family, a Jamaican family. And my dad's got a lot of great sayings. One of the sayings he's got is, first you do it, then you find the courage. Right? It's pretty deep. And what Allie was talking about is very courageous. Most people don't want to stand up and declare themselves to be anything different than what the corporate culture says they should be or need to be. So, you know, the notion of shareholder value is one that is very narrow, too narrow, and it has taken hold of American business and much of the business in the rest of the world, which leads you down to one path, which is profit only and profit in one way. And so what we need to do is to redefine what shareholder value means, and it really means doing good and doing well at the same time.
Second of all, I will remind us all here today that there is a demographic which has been labeled cultural creatives. It's 40 million people. The trend that we're seeing in all sectors is, you know, for our baby boomers here, who and my mother, who's very active in the women's movement, you know, that's her thing. We had environmentalists in the 60s, human rights activists, everyone, gay rights activists, and everyone segregated. Now there's a more general and more powerful, I think, group who has formed. They are concerned with spiritual beliefs and consciousness, environment, human rights, and culture, and just society. And under that rubric, the force of us working together is much, much greater than what we have today.
Let me jump in for a second,
Yeah.
if I may.
And then I'd like
I am so positive about what Allie is saying to your question. So positive. We were at the White House April 28th. We met with Jared Bernstein, who's the chief economist. We met with Mo Vela, director of administration. We met with Terrell McSweeney, who's the head of domestic policy. We were talking about green. And what impressed me was not the administration officials. It was the young people, Allie's generation, that were there. They were sharp, they were smart, they were committed, and they're going to be in that administration, learn every trick of the trade, and then they're going to go back out in the corporate world. And that's where you're going to get your change.